All right, thank you for joining us today for the next installment of the Sports Management Club Virtual Speaker Series. My guest today is none other than Casey McGaw. She's the social media coordinator for the Indianapolis Indians, and she has got, if you have not looked at her LinkedIn profile, she has got a plethora of experiences within social media and sports in general, as well as marketing. So Casey, I'm going to open things up by just letting you kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and kind of what you're all about.
Sure. So like you said, my name is Casey. I'm the social media coordinator for the Indianapolis Indians. I've been with the team since September of 2018. So on my third year now, which is very exciting. I went to school at a really tiny place in downtown Pittsburgh called Point Park University. Pittsburgh Steelers, you can see that there. I majored in sports management and a business degree. Did a bunch of internships, did one with the Pittsburgh Penguins in their social media department. You can see my cats in the background, sorry. Did one with the Pittsburgh Penguins when I was a junior in college, discovered that I loved the sports social world and kind of took off from there as my path. And that was right before we won our second cup in a row, which was super fun. So from there, I graduated in December 2017, did a full-time internship with the Augusta Green Jackets. And then from there, I came here to Indy. So I've been all around the country now doing things, but I love what I do. Some personal stuff. I have two cats named Buster and Flurry. And I love football. I'm very excited for some Wednesday afternoon football. Hockey, I just kind of do my job and take a lot of photos in my free time, watch a lot of sports in my free time, and that's basically it.
So you're a big football fan. Thinking about Wednesday afternoon football, who would have ever thought that that was going to happen, right?
Oh my God.
Steelers fans, I know, are rejoicing around the world that they're actually playing this one, right?
Yeah, it's like nobody wants this asterisk on our undefeated season, but at the same time, it's like, come on, there's like, oh well, it wasn't the actual team that messed up the rules, but the NFL put in protocol, but it's too big of it's one of the biggest rivalries in sports, so canceling this game definitely would.
Yeah, it couldn't happen.
It's going to get a lot of media attention either way, so it'll be a good one, but I'm confident.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, first off, you went to Point Park, and I know Point Park, but a lot of people don't know Point Park. But it kind of led you, sports, arts, and entertainment, management. It kind of led you in, but you didn't start there. It looks like you started at Harrisburg at a intern with public relations and design.
Yeah, so the way it worked at Point Park is you had to take some class. I think it was sophomore or junior year in order to get an internship for credit, but I wanted to get started sooner. So I am from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and I grew up doing theater and performing with a local theater, and they had a summer PR and design program. So I applied for that. Obviously, I had some good connections, and I kind of got started that way, where I was able to really start doing, some design work, some work with their socials, kind of figuring out what it's like to promote events and things that way. So that was really cool. And again, it's not sports, but all of the skills were transferable. So by the time it came time for me to head to the baseball winter meetings and start applying for other things, I had that solid concrete experience in an industry that's very similar. So that's where I started and just kind of snowballed from there.
Just a little different of an experience, I guess, to begin your career. So you shifted, though. I see that you spent a few months in the ticket office with Tri-City.
Yes. So after, I think that was summer 2015, I was in Harrisburg with the theater. I had the opportunity to go. I applied and interviewed and was selected to go with some students from my school to the baseball winter meetings, minor league PBEO job fair, which was really cool. So there, I was looking for my first break in sports. I was a sophomore. Other than that PR internship and doing stuff, I traveled with my high school team, for example. Other than doing that, I basically had nothing on my resume. So starting out, obviously you can't be too picky. So I applied with hundreds of teams, interviewed with maybe 11, and it ended up working out in Tri-City. So for my first sports experience, I went to Tri-City up in near Albany, New York. Worked in their ticket office for the summer, loved it. I loved the team, the people. It was short season, so the homestands were a little less brutal. But yeah, I did that. And again, at that point, I hadn't discovered that social was exactly where I wanted to go. So I had kind of an open slate. But regardless, it was a good place to start because with internships, even if you do know what you want to do, but you're still looking for your first break, don't ever think you're too good for something, but then also internships are good at showing you what you do like to do, but also what you don't like to do. So I've never worked in a ticket office. I've never worked in sports. I figured out, hey, this is fun, but I don't think it's for me. Apparently I'm not very good at sales calls and things. So it's
yeah, that's a very special side of things to be into sales, right? I'm not a sales guy either. So you've been in a variety of other experiences, both in live media, social media. So what made you identify that social is what you wanted to do?
Yeah. So for me, and from the beginning, sports were always a really special part of my life. And that experience was always a really special part of my life. And so I knew before, or when I went into my career in sports, I wanted to help make that magic for people too. I just didn't know how. So when I got to the Penguins and I saw, the reaction, and one of my first jobs was running the Penguin Snapchat. And I saw how people reacted to our social content, and I'm a creative person, so being able to capture those moments and then showcase them and help connect people to our brand, and capturing those live moments, really connecting them with what was going on just felt really cool to me. The first game I ever covered was this crazy one against the Capitals of all teams, where there was like 7 goals between both teams in the second period. Not everybody can make it to a game. So being able to showcase that and showcase those moments, show Crosby getting the OT game-winning goal, because of course he did, was awesome, and it felt really cool. And so from there I kind of discovered that, hey, through creative media and words and online digital channels, I am able to take this sports brand and make it accessible for people, and that just felt really cool. So there's a lot I like about it, but that was it for the most
So
part.
how do you determine that you want to tell the story, or I guess you could say, how do you determine that that's what you wanted to do as far as sharing the brand with people and making it more accessible to people? How did you determine that?
I just, I thought, again, I liked the experiences of being in the events. When it came to even the quote unquote boring office work, I liked the office work that came with social more than I liked the office work, for example, of game entertainment. I liked that side of the game day better. I liked that it could be from anywhere. So, game day entertainment, I did some internships in that. That was fun, but it was a little more, it was just game days. With social, I realized that I can represent all parts of the brand. So, I can help cover practices. I can show behind the scenes moments and things that fans don't necessarily have access to. So there's, I have to help provide value. So we would often brainstorm ideas for sponsors and how do we, make that engaging. So there's just so many little different ways and things to cover. And obviously everybody thinks of, covering games, that's the most exciting. And yeah, it is exciting. But even when it comes to just that office work, and things that aren't the games, there's just so many other different things you can cover and show people. And especially right now with COVID, that's a big thing teams are doing. Like, okay, there's no games going on, so your job is to still showcase your brand and make people feel attached to your brand emotionally. And if that's just really cool, it's almost like a puzzle you have to figure out.
So when you're thinking about associating a brand and social and really building it up as far as awareness, right? What types of skills do you think a student should attempt to gain in college that they may not be on that path? For instance, sport management students, they may not get those experiences, but what would you say the skill sets that they should try to attain are?
Sure. And this is an interesting thing about social too. People get into social roles from like all different majors and facets. For example, my major was a business major, but looking back on it now, I wish I would have done something more in the communications field. But even if not, it's really, really good. Obviously, being able to write well. It's a lot different than journalism, and that journalism is more long form, but you still need to be able to use concise words to tell stories. You need to be able to get messages across in short characters. So being able to write well is huge. Being able to have some variety in terms of content creation is also huge. For example, I'm no graphic designer, but I have, basic abilities in different Adobe programs like Photoshop, After Effects, Adobe Premiere, making videos and animations, and nothing super crazy or fancy, but it's something that as a social person, sometimes I'll have to throw together a video. You sit up there in the press box. Sometimes, we're making little animations for sponsors. And so having the technical skills to do that is important. I know a lot of people working for teams will often have to go take photos and do photography work, which is something I personally really enjoy. So, being able to operate basically a normal DSLR camera and getting good shots and learning how to kind of capture that stuff is important. And then another thing I kind of started learning later on too, there's so many little different pieces, analytics and strategy and being able to think clearly. So taking a look, for example, at social media analytics and kind of determining, okay, one, what does this mean? What are engagements? What is an average engagement rate? How can you explain that to your higher ups who don't necessarily understand what those are either? And how can you make those numbers that you're reading into tangible assets that make sense? And then how do you plan from there? So again, no matter what your major is, if you're in business, if you're in comms, you can still develop those skills. So I would really focus on writing, content creation, and then start taking a look too into different ways to read and understand analytics, because you can post till you're blue in the face, but if you don't understand why you're posting and why something is or is not working, there's no end game there. So
yeah, I'm going to get into that question with you here in a few minutes. So attendees, drop questions in the Q&A. I'll do the question and answer session probably about 2:35, somewhere in that area. We normally have the shared responsibility between myself and Kyle, but right now Kyle is unloading a truck at the NCAA warehouse. We'll do part of his internship with the Indiana Sports Corp. So
cool.
he's kind of indisposed at the moment. But so I want to. So how did you learn those things? You didn't do comms, right? So how did you learn Photoshop and After Effects and Premiere Pro and those sort of things?
Yeah. So again, for me, I was in a kind of unique position where I feel, not to knock my major, I feel like all of my experience and the things I learned that help me now came from real world experiences, like my internships and just doing them. But if you're still in college and you have time, take some graphic design classes, take a photography class. I watch a lot of YouTube tutorials. I was watching one earlier on how to use After Effects to make lights twinkle.
Ooh, the twinkle effect.
Yes. So I did a lot of just research on my own time, but then most of it honestly came from just having to do it. So for example, my writing, I've always been good at, writing social copy, but it definitely improved. So when I first got at the Indians, my bosses would have a lot more edits to my copy. We plan everything in advance so they can look it over. But then as I grew and I developed, like my writing got better, it fit our brand voice better. I had to learn how to use After Effects for some sponsored activations we have in game. So I had to learn how to work in those programs. I had to learn how to make little basic videos. When I was with the Penguins, one day they handed me a huge camera and I had no idea how to use it. And shooting hockey players is very hard. Everything is very white and they're very fast. So I had to learn how.
You had to learn white balance right away.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You learn by doing. And if I look at my photos from then now and what I'm taking now, and you can see a clear difference. So Everybody learns differently. Some people, taking a class will help. For some people, watching YouTube videos and taking notes will help. But for me, and I recommend this too, if you're able to learn those things in your internships, do it. Actually having to do it for something is helpful because that forces you to really know how to do it and do it well. Repetition and just, again, really just having that hands-on approach. One thing in terms of design, because design is hard, I will sometimes go into a Photoshop file that our designers have made and click around and look at all the layers and see what they did. How did you guys make things all pretty? Just physically going in and visualizing it and looking at it and asking questions. I ask our designers and our video guy a million questions. Don't be annoying, but also don't be afraid. Everybody has a job to do, but if there's something I want to know, I ask. And that's just kind of how you throw yourself into it and learn it, is just by physically doing it.
So what would you say, and this is where you can be a little bit candid, I guess, what would you say is the best part of your job? You're down on the field, you're taking pictures, and I want to dispel this myth right away for the people in attendance, and that's, she doesn't just walk around with a phone in her hand. She walks around with like 3 of them and a DSLR camera, right? So it's not just walking around with a phone and recording and posting, right? There's a lot more that goes into it. But what would you say is that best part of your job?
Oh man, again, I'm a creative brained person. I like that there's always something different for me to do. I like that I can create that content. I like that I can write. I like that I can do live coverage. Sometimes you'll see me up in the press box. I'll run down the stairs with my computer because I have to make a graphic, but I also want to capture the game-winning hit. I like that everything's fast-paced and different. And I know a standard question is, what do you do on a daily basis? Well, that's really hard to quantify in social because it always changes. So, and I like that. I don't think I would be happy, and some people are, and that's fine, in a job where it's 9 to 5, I shut off at 5, boom, there you go. It's exciting, it's fast-paced. I can take photos, I can design things if I want to, I can, be involved and, again, connect. I can make experiences special for people because of what we create. And I just think that's really cool.
So do you shut off at 5 in the off season, and in the season you shut off at 3 a.m. every day?
No. That's the thing with social too. It's definitely one of the harder parts of the job is, I am the primary digital source of communication there. So when people have questions, or if we have an event or a game coming up and people what's this? Where do I park? Is it gonna rain? Is the game canceled? Is the game canceled? Is the game canceled? If there's rain, even if it's 10 hours before the game, I'm the one. We can't just social media. It's social. It's a two-way communication. So my job is to help with that and answer people's questions. So it's definitely not 9 to 5. I'm lucky that I have 2 really good bosses and a good department where if I need to take a break or I have to go work my second job or I have to do something, they're like, hey, we'll watch comments and we'll take care of things for you. That's something a lot of people don't have, and I'm really lucky that way. But again, it is my job. So for the most part, I'm the one watching it, What was it? Like I said, so for example, if it's a game day, there was one last season, it started raining early in the morning and I got my first message at 7:30 a.m. and they didn't stop up until ever. I think we got our last one at 11 p.m. well after the game had been postponed. Hey, is the game going to be canceled? Is the game going to be canceled? What do I do with my tickets if it rains? What do I do with my tickets if it rains? And we're at the mercy of the decision makers, but I was sitting in a nail salon even trying to answer those questions. So, it's kind of hard. It's hard to shut off, even though I have the ability to shut off if I want to. It almost makes me anxious shutting off because it's our brand, but again, my job. So
yeah, you're at the mercy of meteorologist Randy on game days when he's watching the Doppler like a hawk, right?
Yeah, we have a whole little team of people. So we have a pre-written kind of response that we send to people before the game, and it was going to be great. We had a whole rain delay plan that we were going to use in 2020. And, then we wait for updates and, umpires and coaches and, different decision makers there. So
it always cracks me up to go down to the office and see Randy with his Doppler on, and he's just looking at it every 5 minutes. It's updating, and he's just staring at it like, what's going to happen? Where's this storm going to go? That sort of stuff.
It's so hard. So if you're ever at a game, and I know people really want to know things, and we want to give them those answers too. But, there was one time we had to block somebody because they were essentially harassing our Facebook account because we weren't making a decision. Social people don't make the decisions. Nothing to do with any of it.
And no, Casey is not an intern. Okay. Just to anyone out there in the general public, she is posting. She is not an intern. Okay. Yes. That's what people think social media is interns.
No. And, sometimes interns are helpful. And like when I was a Penguins intern, I helped write copy and stuff, but they didn't just give me the keys to the kingdom. We have interns sometimes that help with like rowdy social accounts, for example. We don't just hand it off and say, here you go, just go ahead and do it. No, they're all corporate accounts are not interns. And please don't bully them. I understand wanting answers, but it's not our fault. It's not our fault.
Well, you seem to be with the smiles and the excitement talking about the job. You seem to be that you're in love with your job, right? So you've had a lot of them, and you've had a lot of really good experiences. So what would you say on your way to the Indians? And the Indians, I don't think is the end for you, but it's a pretty high level position, right? So as you're climbing that ladder, what would you say was the most rewarding experience that you got during your time moving? You moved pretty fast into a social media coordinator position at a minor league team, right? So you've moved into that position, but what on the way was probably the most rewarding?
For me, it was really rewarding. So my first internship obviously was with the Penguins. Something that was really rewarding for me was hearing their positive feedback and knowing I impressed them with how I was as an intern. Cause I would skip class to go take photos of practices and stuff, but don't do that, kids. But I went above and beyond as an intern. So when it came time for the start of the next season, the NHL it's called something different now, but they were called, real-time correspondence. So basically people that helped the NHL on game days getting content for both teams. And that was something that the team recommended me for. So even after I was an intern, my old supervisors at the Penguins went to the NHL and said, hey, here's her resume. We think she'd be great for this. And I got hired on for a paid position on game nights, getting that content. And for me, that was really, really cool because I love hockey. I loved what I got to do on game days, and knowing that I was able to then take that next step and make that into a paid job was really, really cool. Because it's a sense of accomplishment. And so I think that was probably one of my favorite moments for sure.
So shifting to the more of the business aspect of social media, we've kind of bounced around a little bit, but I'm becoming more focused here as I've got my list of questions. Plus, I'm hoping that more than one person will drop a question in the Q&A. When it comes to social, right, it's not a one-time deal. It's a 24/7 job, right? So what processes do you go through, and including your team, right, to identify strategies for the franchise, for the club that maybe, I don't know how to describe it. I guess I just leave it at that. What process do you go through to identify strategy?
Yeah. So, and I will say this team and the bosses that I'm under right now are really good at planning and organizing, and they've really helped me grow in that way too. And I know a lot of teams and a lot of people, social is like, oh, it's an on the fly thing. You don't really plan for it. No, we plan. It's good to be flexible, but again, social is more than just game days. It's more than just posting funny memes, although that is fun. You are your brand's voice, and there's different brand messages that you have to get across. So we operate, or we try to the best of our ability. Again, this year is a little hard, 2 weeks ahead for social. So we have what's called a planning calendar where people can put on, important dates, the starts of merch sales, when certain tickets are going on sale. We meet with different departments to discuss what they have on their plate. I have biweekly meetings with our communications team, with our sponsorship team to discuss, okay, hey guys, what sponsors are looking for activations? We'll talk to tickets. Hey guys, what kinds of things are you putting on sale? Merchandise. What kind of sales do you have in the works? We plan that out. We then think through, okay, so merch wants a Black Friday sale. When are we going to post it? Where are we going to post it? How often are we going to post it? So once we identify those little things, then we think, okay, great. So we're posting 5 times. So what kind of media do we want to use? What times of day do we want to post them on? How do we reach the most amount of people, and how do we keep it so the message doesn't feel stale? So a lot of planning. And for me, again, that's been very helpful. So we have what's called that marketing planning calendar. And then once we have everything else figured out, I have my content calendar. So I'll go through and I will write out the copy. I'll put in the links. I'll make a note of, is there a sponsor? I'll make a note of, do I need to include any special tags or anything in it? So that way, when it comes time to post, I can pre-schedule everything, and those messages that are getting across different brand points are taken care of. Because if you just kind of leave everything to chance and last minute, social media is a lot of little moving pieces. So it's good to have that plan together and keep that organized. So then, for example, after a campaign, for example, one of my to-dos today is tracking how our Black Friday performance did on social. I'll look through individual posts. I will look at our sales. I will look at each channel. I will then analyze, okay, great. So we had the most sessions to our website from Facebook, but we saw our most sales on Instagram. I'll look at, okay, more people liked this graphic, or more people liked this photo. We got more link clicks on this type of media, and make notes of those things. So when it comes time to start that cycle over again, when we have a merch sale on the marketing planning calendar, when we have an idea of what we need to talk about, I can reference what we've done before and strategize and plan from there. Like, hey guys, we didn't see any sales on Twitter, so let's put more priority on Facebook content, or whatever the case may be. So to summarize, again, I always feel like it's hard to quantify these things, and I'm a rambler, but really just staying organized, really making sure you're communicating with other departments, and keeping that line of communication open. Plan ahead, and even if you plan ahead for something pops up and you can't post it, it's better to have a plan and be prepared and know that you can be flexible with putting something off than to wake up one day, say, oh heck, we have tickets going on sale today. What do I post? What do I do? And then the products that you put out isn't as good. For us, it gives us time to get graphic requests into our designers. It gives us time to plan and make sure that the quality of content we put out is top notch. And it's something we pride ourselves on. And I think we do it pretty well.
How did you, and this is from me personally, how did you yourself, Kim, Shane, and all of the communications team, how did you guys, in the immediacy of the shutdown, how did you guys immediately respond to that? I know it was difficult because you had no answers for at least a month and a half, right?
Yeah.
So in the immediacy of what happened, how did you guys respond?
Yeah, so I remember it was that Thursday that the NBA got shut down and minor league baseball announced that they were postponing it. Shane was actually in Bradenton for spring training. So I think it was, and Kim was on maternity leave. So it was Shayla and I think Anna, maybe. There was a couple of us sitting in the conference room on the phone with like Randy and Joel and Shane, and figuring out, okay, here's what we're doing. Here's what we need for a statement. So we were able to put out a statement. From then, we worked with Shane's, there's a lot of our corporate comms copywriting. We worked to kind of establish, this is Flurry, everybody.
Flurry made a visit, and I'm guessing that's named after Marc-Andre?
That is correct, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Goaltender for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yes. And then, you two stop. And so from there, we had a lot of like, what's going on with the season? Is the season canceled? Blah, blah, blah. Obviously, we didn't have the answers, but we can't just flat out say, we don't have the answers. So we created pre-written responses for social. So I'd have to go back and look and see what they said, but thanks for your concern. We will keep you updated. Check back our website, our social. We made a web page that had a little FAQ on it. Basically said, we're abiding by the decisions of Major League, Minor League Baseball, and the Indiana Health Department, the CDC, et cetera, et cetera. So it was just a much nicer way of kind of explaining that, hey, we don't make these decisions, because again, I don't think a lot of people necessarily understand that we're at the mercy of Major League Baseball. They think we can just play if we want to, which is not the case. So we did that. And then from there, obviously, in that immediate time span, we realized that after that initial postponement announcement, and the same thing too, when we actually canceled the season, people are grieving, people are sad. So we kind of respectfully stayed silent. I talked about flexibility earlier. That's really important. So it's easy to hop on things and be flexible with trends, but when sad things happen, know when a current event trumps anything else your brand has to say. So we kind of stayed silent for a few days, got our thoughts together. I'm pretty sure we put out some heartfelt stuff to really, again, let the fans know, hey, we're here for you. We're not going anywhere. And then we went into go mode and started planning content and figuring out, okay, we don't have the answers, but how are we going to keep people engaged, and how are we going to stay afloat as a team? So that's kind of how that process started, but it was definitely hectic. That was
Was there any panic? Do you think there was any panic among you guys? I mean, knowing Joel, knowing Matt, knowing Randy and Shane, I don't believe there was any true panic, but in that moment, there had to have been something that made you guys go, oh no.
Yeah. So again, Shane was in Florida. I think Joel and Randy might have been in Florida too. Like, half the people weren't here. Kim had just gone on maternity leave. I had taken my Facebook Blueprint certification that day. So I was shut out of the world for probably 2 hours. And I'm an anxious kind of person anyways. So I feel like I visibly was more hectic, probably pacing, but I think from an organizational standpoint, we're all very pragmatic. We don't put out anything unless we know it's the right answer. Like we would never put out a statement without running it by Randy, for example. So we hopped into action. We called the people. We all spoke with each other. And we're like, okay, this is what we need to do. And we did what we had to do. So again, short of me probably just being a spaz, I think overall we were we were pretty good about keeping it together.
So you talked about a content calendar, you talked about strategizing, right? Well, I'll shift away from the COVID-19 stuff, right? So how do you determine, and I'm going to get to, we've got a couple of questions in the YouTube chat as well here in a moment, but I had this one question of how do you determine if one of the strategies that you guys have selected is successful? Because again, we're talking about students that maybe have never done something like this before and are really interested in it, or have the belief that I post a lot. I like to post on social media and I think I'd be good at it. So how would you determine that if your strategy is successful?
Yeah. So again, it was hard, especially this past year. So from an overall standpoint, looking at, we now operate 3 social media brands. At the start of our fiscal year, I come up with social media goals. I come up with goals based on, how many followers do I want to see? How much engagement do I want to see by the end of the year? As a whole perspective, I show it to Kim and Shayla, and then we kind of go from there. I determine those numbers based on what we came up with at the end of the fiscal year. And when I keep track of my monthly analytics, I can see, okay, here's those goals I set. Are we achieving them? That's from an overall brand perspective. When it comes to a specific campaign, the thing is, in social, sometimes things work and sometimes things just don't work, and sometimes they don't work very well. So I kind of take a look at, for example, when I continue to look at Black Friday, I'll look, okay, did we get like 10 likes on this post, or were people actually liking it? Were people clicking on the links? We didn't see high conversion rates. So what could that be? Where did we go wrong? Taking a look at, all of those different engagements when it comes to, again, I call them superficial engagements. So things like likes, shares, comments, those are all great. And you want to see those on your content because it means people are engaged with it. But when you're then looking at value too, especially for a campaign where value and providing that monetary return is the end goal, great, it's engaged, but why aren't people buying? So for example, we started the Victory Field brand because we had a lot more outside events. And I was able to see when looking at, we had our golf event called the Links, for example. So I saw that we actually had more people purchase from Victory Field social channels. We can view that in Google Analytics. We use what are called UTM codes. So we put those at the end of every single link we build. And when we go into Google Analytics, that shows us, okay, we had this many sessions, this number of purchases, and this amount in dollar revenue from this link. And in that link, you can see, okay, we used this piece of media. I go through and I see, okay, more people bought from Victory Field's Twitter and more people purchased from a post that had a photo in it. So it differs for each campaign. I see, okay, I set that level of success based on what the most is. And then I kind of determine and rank things from there. So for the next time, if I see that, oh, nobody really bought anything from the Indians, and more people bought based on a photo versus more people bought on a graphic, I then use that in my next campaign, and then I go from there and see if we achieve similar results. So again, it kind of differs. You want to see that superficial engagement, but especially with campaigns, again, where you have that monetary return, you want to, if something's not working and you're not selling anything and nobody's liking your content, you can be as good on your personal social as you want to, but that doesn't matter. You can have 200,000 followers, but if nobody's liking what you put out and nobody's interacting with it, it doesn't matter. It's nice to see follower counts go up, but you want to see that people actually care about what you're doing. And if you keep doing something and you keep getting no engagement on it, then you're not doing something right. And so your job as a social person and as a team is to figure out how to improve and look at each campaign, revisit it, plan for the next time, and it's an ever evolving process. So just don't keep it's like hitting your head against a wall and complaining it hurts and continuing to hit your head against a wall. Don't hit your head.
It's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over with the same result, right? So our first question comes in from the YouTube chat. So it's kind of on that same, I guess, track as what you were just talking about. How do you measure your key performance indicators or fan sentiment for social media in the short term and long term? And if you've got any examples of what you've done in the past, that would be helpful.
Sure. So I know that's something that a lot, in terms of fan sentiment, that a lot of big teams that aren't able to as closely monitor specific conversation do. But since we are a minor league team and our brand volume, like, it's nowhere near as high as, the Pirates mentions and stuff, for example, where I'm more able to closely go through our mentions and see, okay, are people reacting well to something, or are they reacting, poorly to something? So it's not, obviously, if people react badly to something once, for example, we posted something about a former player that was no longer with the Pirates and people did not respond well to it. So from there, we were like, okay, this didn't have a good sentiment. So let's evaluate how we can fix that when we post about a former player next time. Or if we posted something, for example, like a Wallpaper Wednesday, and people were really happy about it, we can see that because we don't have an unmanageable amount of mentions. So it kind of, again, depends on the brand you're with and the team you're with. I know there's systems and softwares that can actually measure brand sentiment into graphs and stuff for you. But for us personally, I just go through and we can see how people are responding. For example, when we announced that we were building the Elements Financial Club, for the most part, people were really excited about this brand new space. But then there was also people that were like, why are you doing this? Where's my seats going? Blah, blah, blah. Valid. But then, we had to think about, okay, how do we phrase that for next time if people have these comments? How do we respond to that? We were able to build out kind of an FAQ sheet, for example. So how do we address those? And that's just kind of how we operate, because it's a little smaller scale than some other big teams.
So on that same, I guess, line of thinking, you talked a little bit about engagement. You talked about likes, comments, things like that. What do you see as probably the most important metric in tracking the value and the level of engagement you get out of a social post? What is it? Is it on the terms of likes, comments, replies, mentions, anything? What would you say is the most important?
Yeah, so I think there's usually two main important metrics I work with. So we have Evergreen Content, which is the fun content that doesn't really, where its goal is to just engage as many people as possible. But then we have content that's more salesy, where we're trying to push people to our website or trying to push people, to buy something. So for Evergreen Content, for example, the metrics I go off of are general engagement. So I use Sprout Social, and it will give me those totals. So I think engagements count like likes, comments, shares, post clicks, link clicks. And there's different systems have different metrics that go into engagement totals. So as long as you stay consistent, it's fine. But that's what I look at. Like, was the post as a whole engaged with well? If I put out a meme and nobody liked it, okay, great, then that wasn't successful. But if I put out, a fun little game and it got a lot of comments or clicks or something, then that's good to know. But then for those posts that are more salesy, I look, obviously engagement is important, but then I'll look into Google Analytics or Shopify or wherever we can see that purchase value. And great, it could have 100 likes on it, and that's awesome. But did people purchase? Was that goal of getting people to buy things completed? If not, again, it's okay because the post did kind of well, but the end goal wasn't met. So we have to figure out where to go from there. For sponsored content, for example, we use a platform that through some algorithm provides a dollar value to a sponsored post. So our goal with sponsored posts is to obviously see a higher dollar amount. Using Wallpaper Wednesdays, for example, those are sponsored. We do different kinds at different times. If I see that dollar amount for that sponsored activation is higher one week than the week before, okay, great. So how do I continue to operate at that higher level? So again, it depends on the kind of content as the main metric, but that's how I would split it up. Evergreen stuff, engagements, sponsored stuff, that dollar value, and then sales posts, purchase value. And you want to see good engagement on all of it, don't get me wrong, but those are the three main splits that I operate on.
So you've got three different types that you kind of keep an eye on, and the return on investment is different for each one based upon whether it be sales and I'm guessing that, and I don't know because I'm not part of the platform, but I'm guessing that your sponsored post is showing value per view, click, et cetera, right? It's going to tell you like a Meltwater News type thing where Meltwater tells you what the value of a 30-second media spot was for your organization.
Yeah. So our system, for example, will pull like, okay, was there a logo in this? Was there a copy tag in this? And its algorithm will kind of compile, how many people they think saw it, and assigns a dollar value to that. And again, people can see different things. They can see like a paid partnership tag. They can see that logo. If we post a highlight, it has the ability to pick up like the Aquafina on the dugouts, and things like that. So providing like, hey, at sponsors, and that in turn not only helps us prove value to sponsors that are already giving us their money, but helps us create assets too. So if I say that, oh, hey, Wallpaper Wednesdays do really, really well, let's put a sponsor on it. and give them that value. We were able to create that sellable asset. Companies are giving us money, and in return, we are giving them eyeballs and value, and that's really important.
Yeah, it's one thing about social that I don't know if any of you really understand yet, and that's that a lot of it is virtual value. It's not tangible unless it's a sales thing. It's not a tangible value. It is a best estimate of eyeball numbers, right? And it's a difficult thing to quantify, as you said a couple of times, Casey. It's a very difficult thing to quantify at times. So Kobe dropped a question in our Q&A here, and it's kind of shifting back a little bit away from the business side and more of the how to get into the business side of things, right? So Kobe asks, how many graphic designers or / video editors are on your staff? And how large are the creative / social teams at the MILB level? And I know that answer, but I'm going to let you answer that.
Yeah, so the Indians are very, very lucky, and I wouldn't consider us a standard at all. So we have a very big team compared to what most teams have. So starting with our team right now, we have a video production person, we have 2 designers, we had a motion designer, she actually just took another position, and then we have me, a social media person. My boss is the digital marketing manager. We have a director of marketing, and then we have a game presentation manager too. And all of us are in the marketing department, and all of us brainstorm different ideas and things. And then we have, 3 people whose job is solely to create that content. And then I'll create some content too, depending on what it is. So we are very lucky in that we have a big team to create those things. But for the most part, especially in minor league baseball, your staff will be like 2 people if you're lucky. So for example, in Augusta, it was me as an intern, my boss, who was the director of marketing, and then we had a guy to help with control room video stuff. And that was even a lot. We're then 3 people. And my boss, who was the director of marketing, also oversaw community relations and game presentation. So she was doing, and media relations. She was doing the job of like 4 to 5 people and just her job. There's positions with lower teams that you'll be doing exactly that: community relations, media relations, social media, digital, emails, website, all of it is just one person. And so that's why having a diverse skill set is helpful. And in a way, that internship in Augusta especially helped me because I was the same type of thing. I helped with marketing, emails, social, community relations, all of it. It gave me a better understanding of how different departments work, which I think makes me better at, than posting about it now because I understand. But just kind of be prepared to take on a lot if you are with a smaller team. And I know some even major league teams don't have as many people as we do. So we're very lucky in that way. But for the most part, that's not always the case. And minor league baseball is fun, don't get me wrong, but definitely having that diverse skill set will set you apart because for a lot of teams, you have to be able to wear multiple hats and do different things.
That bridges nicely into his follow-up question. What do you guys look for when you're looking to add to your team, whether it be an intern or a full-time staffer? It's a great question that college students should be asking. Everyone that they run into is, what do you guys look for, right? And how was your experience when you were being hired?
Yes. So again, one thing I really like about the Indians especially is we have very high standards, but that's good. So we look for, obviously, like, do you meet the basic skills? Do we like the work that you've presented to us? But then another thing we look for when hiring too is, does your personality mesh well? Like, we pride ourselves too in having a nice company culture. We want to make sure that you'll get along here. We don't want to hire somebody that just doesn't get along. So we want to make sure that you're the best at what you do in your field, but then also that, you get along with everybody and that you're personable. So it's weird to say to have a good personality, but, really try when you're interviewing to make sure that, you're getting along with these people, because company culture, I've had bosses that I did not get along with and it made the job miserable. But the reason I'm so happy here is because I have a team of really incredible people that I love and get along and work well with. And you're not always going to work well with everybody, but you'll find that in any job. So my interview process, again, was the most rigorous of any that I have gone through. I started off with presenting a project almost where they had me mock up different social media posts based on different situations. I sent that in. And for that, you always want to try and find, no matter what your step in the interview process is, a way to go above and beyond. So I physically went through and I created, instead of just writing out captions, I went through and I made the social posts. I created a fake Twitter account. I made a burner Facebook. I made all those social posts and visually showed them, hey, this is what it'll look like. From there, I got a Skype interview, which for that, a little harder to prepare for. But, thinking of questions, doing your research on other content they've posted, doing your research on the people that you're interviewing with, writing down questions so you can ask more questions than just, what's the typical day like? Because you want to show that you've done your research, because you want to prove that you're an asset to them, and you'll be an asset to them if you know the company. From there, I flew out for my in-person interview, which was very intense. So I sat in a room with Charlie, who was my boss, because I used to be in the communications department. Charlie, Randy, Joel, all the big wigs. And it was just about an hour straight of back and forth, asking about questions, my experiences. And again, kind of like a Skype interview, it's okay to ask some of those same questions repeated, but doing more research, I came up with, some ideas. Again, really trying to prove, okay, I have this experience, yeah, but I've done my research. Here are some ideas I have. Here's what I can bring to the table. For example, if you're interested in a social role, one thing that'll really impress people is looking at sponsored value, because especially with the higher ups, they're not as concerned with the day-to-day, engagements and memes. I know, for example, when I can prove to Joel that, hey, we have provided value for these sponsors, that's great. He's happy. Everybody's content. So, ask, oh, so I see that you use logos in your gifts. So, what other opportunities are there for sponsorships? Like, here's an idea I had of something that you post right now that I believe could have a sponsor put on it. Learn what some of those sponsors are. Really familiarize yourself with that brand. So you can, a lot of questions you can't prepare for, but you go into an interview and you can better answer them. For example, I sat in on some intern hiring processes, and one of the job descriptions was helping manage Rowdy, our mascot, social accounts. And we would ask, so what are some ideas you have to improve Rowdy's social presence? And people would just stand there looking like, fish. Read the job description, try and come up with some ideas and do your research based on that, because then even if you do get surprised with a question, you can answer it. Another good question to ask always is, what else can I tell you about myself to prove to you that I am the right person for this job? I always use that as my final, boom, finish it off one. And that's just a good one to do, because then they have to think about, okay, we want to hire her. What else do we need to know in order to make that decision? So just do your research. Don't go in unprepared. Come up with some ideas, show how you can prove that value, show that you know what's going on, but then, be confident in your experiences too.
So Alyssa dropped a question in that says, so as a social media coordinator, you got to be a creative mind. And how do you stay creative? I've run into that same thing as a person who's, did PR for a decade. How do you stay creative and keep coming up with new, fresh, exciting content ideas without actually running out of them?
Yeah, it's definitely hard. So we do a couple of different things. One thing is I make sure in my personal accounts, I follow other people in my field. I follow a lot of team accounts. A lot of it's doing research. So I'll go through and I'll look at, what kinds of stuff are other baseball teams posting? What kinds of stuff Are they getting engagements on? A lot of social is not copying other people, but drawing inspiration from other brands too. So, doing your research and seeing what the trends are, what people are doing, what's working, and how you can adopt that to fit your voice. Not every meme is going to make sense for your brand, and you shouldn't hop on every single thing that the internet does. But if there's something that makes sense, great, use that as an idea. We also have on Slack, which is what we use to chat with each other every day, an ideas channel. So whenever we see a cool social post or a cool thing on a website or a cool video, we take that link, we send it, all the staff are in it, and then we discuss like, hey, this is really cool. How can we make this work for our team, or how can we adopt this? And then it's hard to stay creative sometimes. But then also you'll get those random ideas at 4 a.m. I'm that kind of person too, where I'll just write it down. But really, again, it's a lot of just drawing inspiration from things you see and, trends and pop culture and what other teams are doing, and not copying it, but making it your own somehow, which goes back to knowing how your brand operates.
How about right now with everything that's going on? I mean, I hate to keep coming back to right now, but it's a once in a lifetime thing that no one ever anticipated this happening in March, and the response, the social, from what I've seen, the social response by teams has been out of this world creative over the last 8 months.
Yeah.
And you guys are no exception to the rule. You guys have been in that mix as far as some of your creative content. And during this time, how have you stayed fresh? It's even bigger than her question, right? Staying fresh now, as opposed to, well, it's easy when there's 70 home games, right? Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier.
Yeah. It's the same kind of deal, honestly. We do a lot. And especially in the thick of it, when we were in lockdown, back in the spring, we had weekly ideas meetings. Even now we have weekly marketing department meetings, bi-weekly creative meetings, where we bring things to the table and we sit together, we talk and we brainstorm. But again, it is kind of the same in that you just need to spend time, doing your research and just trying to think. And one thing I always try to think of too is, I'm a person that consumes social. I like sports. What do I think is fun? And then trying to take what I think is fun and what I enjoy doing and seeing if it works for the brand. And, it's, especially in this time, we've learned that, hey, it's okay to take more risks. We're very good at being regimented and planning and diversifying our content. But something we always want to work on is being more flexible and being, okay, great. So this isn't something we've done before. Will it work? We don't know. So trying it, YOLOing it. Is that something people still say? Probably not. Sorry, I'm old. And going on from there and seeing if things work. So again, it's just testing, doing your research, seeing. I'm trying to think of something we've seen from another team that inspired us. Can't think of a specific example, but at the start, a lot of teams were posting online activities for kids. So we did something similar, but then there was activities we saw other teams do or have on their website that we thought, oh, this is fun. Let's do this too. Let's adopt this to our brand. And, again, just kind of going from there. The process is basically the same. You just have to be extra on top of it and communicate a lot more right now, because it's easy with the season, okay, we have prospects night, we have Princess Day coming up. But here you're just staring at a void and figuring out, okay, so we have to talk more and brainstorm more, and it would help if we had a schedule, but
an endless black hole as of right now, right?
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, Noah dropped in a question that says, what's the most successful sport social media platform? And why? Why do you believe that that's the most successful one?
So this is also kind of hard, because it really just depends. I don't think necessarily there's one universal answer. So for example, it goes back to what your goal of a post is or what your goal of a campaign is. So for example, we know that we have a much more family-oriented audience on Facebook. So when we post things and we post about upcoming promotions involving families and activities and kids, that's a message that will better be responded to on Facebook because it's a lot more parents, it's a lot more, people looking for family activities. But then on Twitter, for example, we know that's where we can be a little more spicy with our memes and things, because people on Facebook that audience isn't necessarily going to understand the memes, but Twitter is where that pop culture shift really happens. That's where most of our baseball fan audiences, we have a lot of people that follow the Pirates and us for baseball. So we kind of know that's where we place that content. Instagram is my personal favorite. And that's the ones in my time here that I've seen the most personal growth on, in terms of audience and engagements too. But again, we know that's kind of more of a millennial, Gen Z, more of a me type person, like a young adult sports fan. So it just depends on different audiences. So again, for example, I wouldn't post a bunch of memes on Facebook that I know that audience wouldn't get. So that kind of stuff is most successful on Twitter. Family-oriented stuff is most successful on Facebook. Some teams have seen a lot of success with TikTok. I don't understand TikTok. I love it, but I don't understand it. But we know that's where we're going to hit. We're never going to hit, adults there. So that's where we know, okay, we have the opportunity to engage a much younger generation to create brand awareness. So it's really just about figuring out, again, it's a lot of trial and error, figuring out what audience is on which platform, and then tailoring that content to be successful on each platform, because not everything is going to be universally the same.
Have you gotten a rowdy TikTok yet?
No, so we don't have a rowdy TikTok, but we have a General Indians TikTok that mostly features rowdy. He has.
I know Blue's pretty popular, so.
Yeah. Blue is great.
Yes, I am old and I am on TikTok. Go figure.
I love TikTok. One of the things I tried to do, and it's time consuming. Like TikTok's unfortunately one of the channels I don't have as much time for because, want to place priority on other things, but I recreated some old Vines with Rowdy on TikTok. So he does have his fun there.
Well, that's creative repurposing for the time, right? Yeah. That's always good.
But now
creative repurposing is always good.
And now, the challenge recently has been to figure out, okay, now we have Instagram Reels. What's better?
That's the question right now. Which one's better, right?
Yeah. So
okay, so you touched on this earlier, and I wanted to make this point, but I let it kind of go. But I want to circle back to it. You touched on the winter meetings, and yes. Kobe dropped the question in that said, if I were to attend the minor league baseball, well, it's actually Major League Baseball, Kobe, first. It's the actual MLB winter meetings, right? What could I expect, and how could I better prepare for it? And also, when are the meetings?
Yeah, so the winter meetings are huge. And I'm assuming it's going to be different this year, but let's pretend for a minute that there wasn't a pandemic and everything was normal. To prepare, you want to really get together your resume. One thing that I did when I went through the process in college was creating an online portfolio, basically a website that showcases, your work, who you are, any work examples, because your resume, maybe this is a difference of opinion, but in my experience, no more than a page. You're in college. If you're rambling on to 2 pages on your resume, people aren't going to read it that long. If people want to learn more about you, they will go to your website. You just want to keep that important information there. Even I don't have a resume right now because I'm employed, but when I have a lot of experience, and I was like, oh man, how do I fit this to 1 page? Just keep it to 1 page. Keep it simple. Keep it concise. People are going to scan it and move on. So really tighten up your resume, and then use an online portfolio website as a way to showcase all of your work. We practice a lot with mock interviews. So we would talk to other people in the industry. We would sit in a circle and interview each other with different sorts of questions. We would go through pbeo.com, which is where a lot of those minor league jobs are listed, and we would find the contact emails and we would email them and be like, hey, I'm really interested in this position attached to my resume. I am also attending the baseball winter meetings, the PBO job fair, and I would love to connect when I'm there. And reached out to people ahead that way. So the worst thing you could do is not prepare. There's so many positions that there's no way to prepare as in-depth as I mentioned, like with my Indians interview process at all, but you can prepare as a whole with how you interview, basic questions, your elevator pitch about yourself, making sure that your portfolio is intact and is ready. If there's people you're especially interested in talking to, reaching out to them before and not just saying, hey, I'd love to meet. Introduce yourself, say why you're interested in meeting them, and trying to connect beforehand so they know to expect you. And then also, where is I going with that? It's where it was the biggest minor league networking thing, because it's kind of split into two. So usually like the Major League Baseball meetings where, you know, the coaches and everybody are, that kind of happens separately. But then this job fair is all minor league baseball folks. You know, a lot of executives and people from teams will do things like, you know, go out to the bars and restaurants in the convention center afterwards and kind of all commingle and talk to each other. So you have your professional networking, the job fair part of the day from 9 to 5, prepare for that. But then, you know, barring being underage, please make good choices. You know, that's a good place to really network. Like I met a guy that worked for a team in a bar once my first year, met with him, and he ended up being one of my best network connections in the industry that whole time, because it's casual and people can see, you know, more about your personality. That's where people unwind, and that's where that culture comes into play. Like that's where you make friendly connections, and you don't want to just be a job robot and have no personality. That's important, and that's what people are mainly going to hire you on. But you also, you know, want to make sure that you're personable and hi, and that you get along with people, and that you're able to hold a conversation and, you know, be friendly. So it's a crazy, hectic world. It was the best time ever, though. I miss it, kind of.
So I'm going to throw out here as our final thing. I always do this one. This is my little addition to the whole thing, and that's that nugget, that last parting shot. What is your piece of advice that you will live and die by to a student that wants to get into your industry, wants to be part of your field, that just is that one piece of advice? You've given a bunch here, but there's got to be one that really just stands out for you, and I want to know what that one is. So the floor is yours.
My biggest thing that you guys should focus on is networking, but networking well. You might think, oh, how do I network? There's a pandemic going on. Well, fun fact, most of my networking was online anyways. You know, it's what you know. You should have those skills and develop those skills, but it really is who you know, because you're going to want to meet people. You're going to want to learn. You're going to want to become a name in the industry. You're going to want people to provide you references. If you meet somebody with a team, you know, they might know somebody else in a team that you're applying for. Figure out, again, I can mostly speak for social, but figure out where your network lives. For example, I wanted to get into sports social. My peers and people in my industry are on Twitter. There's that SM Sports hashtag where I was able to find a lot of people in the sports social field. So I really heavily went on Twitter, started following anybody and everybody in the industry. I would look, you know, at their jobs and learn a little bit about them, and then slide in their DMs and be like, hey, I'm Casey. I'm interested in a career in sports social. I really admire your work. You know, one of the people I talked to was used to be with the Seahawks. I really like what you put out, and I would love to chat and learn more about what you do. And that then results in phone conversations, and that then resulted in a good connection. I networked on Twitter with Brad for minor league baseball. He runs the minor league baseball social, and he ended up being a really good reference point for when I was applying for the Indians. So really, it's good to meet people in person, sure, but you know, it's, if you just sit there and you apply for jobs on Teamwork and you go about your merry way, you're going to have a lot more of a hard time if you don't know anybody to reach out to. So, you know, the internet is there. There's no pandemic on the internet. So really go out of your way to make those connections. And when you reach out to the people, again, don't just slide in their DMs unprompted, you know, make sure you follow them, like a couple of their tweets, respond to conversation. If they post about the industry, you know, reply with something, reply with your thoughts, show that you understand, and then send them a message and be like, hey, you know, my name is Casey. I love what you do. I would love to learn more. And that's just a really good way to kind of approach it. Not everybody will respond to you, but a lot of people will, because we all did the same thing when we were starting out. So get to know people, get to network, do your research. And disclaimer, have a professional social media presence. You know, I've been in this job for 2.5 years, so I'm probably a little more lax now that I am hired. But when I was starting out, you know, it was definitely a lot more, not rigid, but, you know, people will look. We joke that social people could be in the FBI, and it's true. We will look and we will creep, and we want to make sure that you're a good representation as a person. So just kind of be careful what you post. If you have any bad tweets from your youth, you see it all the time with athletes, go through and delete it, you know, because social people will creep. We'll try and find out who you are. So if you're going to network on social, be good on social.
That's probably the best piece of advice that could come from a social media coordinator is have a clean presence on social, right? Yeah. First with your personal stuff. Well, thank you, Casey, for coming on here today. Excited to have you on, and I'm hoping to have many more of your staffers on. Again, love the Indians, love the organization. So Friday is our next edition of the Virtual Speaker Series when Cam Fuller, he's the Assistant Commissioner for Competition, Branding, and Sponsorship at the Horizon League. He will join us at 1:00 on Friday. For those of you that want to register, hit up the GroupMe and the SMC GroupMe and get that link from Kyle. And we will be on here at 1:00 on Friday. And we're also having another one next week on the 9th with one of our graduates, Nick Lash and Brandon Hoffman from, you know, Nick, I'm assuming. Nick Lash and Brandon Hoffman, they're from the Detroit Tigers. They'll be on next week on the 9th. So thank you again to Casey, and thank you guys for attending. And hopefully we'll see you on Friday.